once again, as mathematicians, we're taking the derivative using the definition of derivative. They notice that when you have two functions being multiplied together, that there's a certain pattern that the derivative follows. That leads to the product rule. So at the end of this lesson, you'll be able to use the product rule to find the derivative of a function. Right, if you go ahead and look at the product rule, you'll notice it's a little bit different. You would kind of think that if you have two functions and you're multiplying them together, that you would be able to just multiply the derivatives together. Well, that just doesn't quite work. Instead, we've got, let's say we have the function h of x, which is just the product of two separate functions. Then the derivative is actually going to be, we're going to take the derivative of one function times the other original function and then add that function to the derivative of the other function. Okay, the way that I usually like to remember this is the derivative is equal to f prime times g plus f g prime. So let's go ahead and do some examples and get that to make a little bit of sense. All right, you'll notice we want to use the product rule to find this derivative. You can notice really, I could just as easily on this problem distribute the problem to get rid of the parentheses and then take the derivative. So we could totally do that and we'd get an answer, but I'm going to show you that we could also get the answer using the product rule. So we are going to call this first function f and the second function g because we have two functions being multiplied together. Okay, the next thing that I like to do before I actually use the rule is I like to identify my derivatives. My f prime is going to be the derivative of f, which will be 6x. And then my g prime will be the derivative of g, and the derivative of g is 2. Once you've identified that, now it's just plugging different things into a function, into a formula. So we're going to find the derivative of h, and the way that we're going to do that is f prime times g, so 6x times 2x plus 7, and then plus f times g prime, so 3x squared plus 5 times 2. Right, and then when we do this, now all I need to do is clean it up a little bit. I'm going to distribute my 6x, so I'm going to have 12x squared plus 42, plus, now I'm going to distribute my 2. I'll get 6x squared plus 10, and then when I go ahead and combine like terms, I'll get 18x squared plus 52. So that is my derivative. Let's go ahead and try another one. And you might have thought on that other one, well, it would have been way easier just to multiply it out. It probably would have. But there are some times where you can't multiply it out, such as this next example. So we have to use the product rule. So I notice that this is a product of two separate functions. So we are going to call this first function f, and we will call the second function g. And again, I like to set up my problem before I start plugging things into a rule. My f prime, my derivative of f, will be 2t. And my g prime, my derivative of g, the derivative of sine, is cosine. So now we're ready to actually use the product rule. So now using the product rule, I know the product rule is f prime times g, so 2t times sine t plus, and then the next part of the rule is f times g prime. So f times g prime will be t squared times cosine t. And that's pretty much it. We are going to go one more step because especially as we get into solving with derivatives, we'll want to simplify it as much as we can. So I do notice that they both have a t, so I am going to go ahead and factor out a t. So if I factor out a t, what I will have left is 2 sine t plus t cosine t, and that will be my derivative. Right, let's try one more. This next function I have 3 sine x cosine x. This is a product because the sine x is being multiplied by the cosine x. So I'm going to let my first function be 3 sine x. We do need to include that 3 in one of the functions. And then my g will be cosine of x. So again, I'm going to set up the problem. So f prime will equal, the derivative of f will be 3 cosine x. And then g prime, the derivative of cosine x will be negative sine x. And now from here, I'm ready to go ahead and find my derivative. So the derivative formula is f prime times g, so 3 cosine x times cosine x, plus f times g prime, 3 sine x times negative sine x. And again, I'm going to simplify this first of all. When we do cosine x times cosine x, I'm going to write it two different ways to show you. It really means the cosine of x squared. And another way we can write that, which we're used to seeing, is this is cosine squared x. Notice it's not cosine x squared. I have to square the entire quantity, the whole cosine x. And then the next part will be minus 3 sine x quantity squared. And again, rewriting it will be 3 minus 3 sine squared x. So notice where we put the squared again. And then I am going to take this one more step because I notice that I can factor out a 3. So I'll get 3 quantity cosine squared x minus sine squared x, and voila, I have the derivative. So hopefully now you can find derivatives using the product rule.